Hello, everyone, and welcome to our the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind All In, the Fight for Democracy. We'd like to thank our friends at Amazon for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Emmy Award-winning film and television producer Shelby Stone considers her greatest achievement in Hollywood to be surviving. She has produced over 80 hours of television, including films Bessie, Lackawanna Blues, Life Support, and the hit TV series Single Ladies, among others, and is the recipient of over 60 awards and nominations. Shelby is currently the co-founder and managing partner of the Narrative Film Group, alongside noted music manager and producer Derek Dudley. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Shelby. Thank you for being here, and take it away.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment because I was so overwhelmed by both the style and the approach that Lisa and Liz Garbus took for this film, because it's so timely, it's so relevant. And you know, I just on a very personal note, my mother was raised in the Creole corridor in New Orleans and Texas, and this struggle to vote was something that I grew up hearing from my grandparents, that they had recounted from their parents, and my mother experienced until she moved to California. So this is so relevant. The fact that this is still going on decades later is really something that we all need to be very aware of. So I'd like to just start. I've known Lisa Cortés forever. She is a producer extraordinaire. I have heard of Liz Garbus forever as a producer and a director extraordinaire. So I'd love to have the two of you talk about, how did you come together? And what was that experience like to have two really experienced producers and two experienced directors sharing the stage, as it were, as we all think of, you know, that process?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, extraordinaire loves to work with extraordinaire. That's a big part of this origin story. That, coupled with the amazing opportunity that Stacey Abrams presented to us to tell this history and to join us also along with Dan Cogan as a producer on the project. It is always really exciting for me when my art and my activism can come together in a project that speaks not only to this moment in time, but is also very evergreen in its interrogation of this unique part of our American history and the cyclical nature, as you alluded to, Shelby, of voter suppression from the inception of our country to the promise and then the fallback over hundreds of years.
Liz, do you want to add?
Yeah, on the origin story, you know, Stacey came to New York and was meeting with different filmmakers, and I was lucky enough to take a meeting with her and discuss with her goals for this film, and, you know, present a vision of how I thought we might attack it. When I heard she was interested in moving forward, I reached out to Lisa, and then together we sort of fleshed out that idea, and Lisa went and met with Stacey, of course, too, and we were all very, very aligned and felt strong and confident moving forward out into the world together. And, you know, it was a project that we needed, you know, we wanted to have out before the election. And I think it was so important. I mean, just by way of digression, this morning I spent 2 hours on a call with the South Carolina voter protection folks who are looking for volunteers to man their voter, their voter issue hotline. And the training that we had to go through, I mean, the Byzantine process of choosing of filling out your absentee ballot, where the signature should go, where you can drop it, where you can't go, like the amount of ways it can all go wrong is it's dizzying. And, and it just when people are going to vote this season and they feel that sense of like, is it just me or is this system totally overwhelming? We wanted the film to be part of that conversation. It is not just you. It is this way by design. And it gives latitude for ballots to be disqualified and questioned by the powers that be. So it was so important that it be in the conversation. So Lisa and I really, divided and conquered and worked together and separately, and then came back together in order to create the film.
So I'd love if you elaborate a little bit more, like how did you had a blueprint for the film. How did you decide who was doing what, and then how did that get blended?
Well, in our first meetings with Stacy, she kind of, broke down the history and the issues, which Liz and I were familiar with beforehand, but as we've all seen with Stacey Abrams, she unpacks it in a way that is so fluid and elegant, and is always kind of, helping us to recontextualize this moment that we're in. Mm-hmm. She talked about this architecture of voter suppression, like, can you cast and can your ballot be voted? And then Liz and I started talking about, like, what does the history look like? What is that timeline? And very early on, we knew that we didn't want this to be a film that existed in the past tense, that we wanted to identify contemporary stories, Stacy's, of course, but others too, like, our examination of Amendment 4 in Desmond Meade in Florida, or the young Latinx folks in Arizona with Lucha. And that it was important to have these contemporary stories that would allow us to toggle and travel through time. And so with that in mind, we then looked at who would be the best folks for us to talk to. We spoke with Stacy. She generously opened up her contacts, to such great folks as everyone from Eric Holder to the wonderful professor Carol Anderson, Ari Berman, and quickly started interviewing these incredible contributors and to incorporate them into everything that we were building out.
So I take it you divided and conquered, right? So you did some interviews and were you flying around? And I think the story of the age of COVID and how you pulled this off is pretty good.
Yeah, we were flying around, and there were different, we spent some time in Georgia, of course, Arizona, New Hampshire, Florida. What locations did I leave out? And New York, obviously. We interviewed people in New York. I'm sorry, Shelby, what was the rest of your question?
To talk about how I get it, you two divided and conquered. Each of you split up interviews and the other material that you use to tell the story. But I would love to know just how you did this during COVID, which I think.
Oh, during COVID. Oh, yeah, that was that part.
The TGA is pretty tight here.
Sorry, that's the part that I forgot. I wish we could forget. We actually completed. Lisa and I flew back from Atlanta from our last interview. We did a few interviews with Stacy, and sort of at around rough cut time, we wanted to do one more sort of final interview with her. And I think, did we also do Andrew Young at that time? Did you do Andrew? Anyway, we flew back from Atlanta. I think it was March 9th. COVID. We were aware of it, but it wasn't the full-on lockdown yet. But by the Friday of that week, that I think it was March 13th, New York did begin to shut down. And our editor had come from Lisbon to work with us in Brooklyn. And, there was this panic of, am I gonna be able to get back to my home country? And so I think it was also that Friday that she decided, Lisa and I were just like praying. Lisa's like, she told me she's going back to us. We're like, oh no, what are we gonna do? And
get the drive ready to give to her.
So we were and then it was like, well, what do we do? And then it became clear fairly quickly that anybody who we were editing with was going to end up being remote with that. Like, we weren't going to just be able to find someone to come into our office in Dumbo. It was going to be, we were going to have to work remote anyway. So yeah, we then like loaded Nancy up with the drives and she flew to back home to Lisbon. And we have a great post supervisor who worked out the workflow with our junior editor and our assistant editors. So they're all linked up on the same system through the magic technology, and sharing cuts with me and Lisa back and forth. And, then we would just Zoom and we'd have our calls every morning and get up to date. But yeah, we were all siloed at that point. But luckily we had done all of our in-person shoots. And we, and then we had a great archival team, and archival was slow to come in too, because a lot of those folks who, are working those houses, who are the ones who give you, the screeners, and then you have to follow up to get the masters, a lot of them were not coming into the office. So there were a lot of challenges. It took a little extra time than we had originally budgeted and scheduled, but Amazon was supportive, obviously, and we were able to get through.
I think one of the blessings too is that, for me, I would save time commuting. So I had more hours to put in. And, in the early days of the pandemic, it wasn't about like, I work from 10 to 6 or 10 to 7. It's just like work was a great refuge. And because we had an animator in Poland, an illustrator in Berlin, our main editor in Lisbon, other members of our team in Atlanta, New York, LA, like we could keep things going, and it was something that we were all so excited about and committed to making our delivery date, that I think that the pandemic was it provided a refuge to take the fear and frustration and funnel it into the film.
Yeah, I think everyone would talk about like just feeling, because our film was so because what we were hearing on the news was such an assault on voting rights, and it was just, and with the pandemic, everybody felt sort of grateful to be working on this during that time, because we just felt like we were, going to help further the understanding of how we got to now, for those who tuned in.
No, listen, I don't think that there's been anything that has laid out the history of America's voter suppression that has yes been concentrated in the South, but has also been done in other northern states. I think one of the great misunderstandings sometimes in the North and the West is that they keep thinking, oh, it's just the South, but no, it's everywhere. Yeah.
And I think,
sorry.
Thank you. And I think that was like one of the things when we first met with Stacey, as a filmmaker, you think, oh, making a film about Stacey Abrams, she's so dynamic, we could follow her next campaign, the whole thing. But, Stacey was very clear, and she was right, that if you make it about Stacey Abrams, then you say, oh, well, that's the South, that's Georgia, that's Brian Kemp, he's a bad guy, you can write it off. But when you connect it to hundreds of years of history, spanning, like you said, from sea to shining sea, you cannot write it off. Like, you see, oh no, Georgia is the product of hundreds of years of hard work of voter suppression in the making. It is not an anomaly. And, and of course, Stacey is the spine of the film, but she needed to be just that. She did it, we need to be able to toggle, as Lisa said, back to history all the time. So you were fully aware that this was not this was no accident.
Yeah, I really urge people to follow up and see this movie, because it makes, if you had any confusion, you're not confused by the time it's over. The argument is very clearly made. And she is such a dynamic, amazing woman. I mean, as we're all women on this panel right now, I'd love for you to, I've never met her. I'd love to hear just a little bit more about her vision. And she is a producer on this, how she, other than opening her address book, how she helped you guys with the shaping of this.
Well, I always like to recount the story of when we shared I think it was the first rough cut. And we had incorporated a little bit more of her story in than we thought she might be comfortable with. And I remember we waited with bated breath over the weekend to hear back from her. And we had explained why in creating the spine of the story, we chose to focus on milestones in her life, and in particular, the 2018 gubernatorial run. And what was amazing when we got the response from Stacey is we saw that she took the individual hat off and she put the producer hat on and said, you know what, I totally get where you're going and what you are constructing. You know, I always think, like, when she looks at voter suppression, she looks at the architecture, and in some ways she understood the architecture of the story that we were building, and you know, in turn shared with us her memoir so that we could even mine a little bit more into her story and find these moments that we then incorporated, you know, into the film.
That's great. That's such a gift. That's you feel it in the movie.
Yeah, she was tremendous. I mean, she was wonderful, and she never, you know, she's one of those people who knows what she knows and knows what she doesn't know, and therefore, you know, Lisa and I felt free and independent. There was no vanity or ego stuff that happened. Really, no, you know, editorial tweaking. I mean, nothing. Like, I think somebody in her organization once raised a question about why we had interviewed somebody who was on the right wing, who was an architect of voter suppression. And, you know, she backed us up saying, you know, we needed to go there and give, you know, and understand their argument for the richness of our film. And yeah, I mean, she was terrific. And she continues to be. We're all a bit in awe of her.
Understandably, I'm in awe of her, and I haven't met her, but I think she's I think she's a force of nature in the best use of that word.
Yeah, you know, I'll say one more thing. You know, I've interviewed a lot of people, Lisa has too, and you know, after 2, 3, 4 hours, people tend to get a little dull. You know, they're not making their sentences quite as beautifully, or they can't, you know, they need to get up, move around. I mean, her energy and focus is like nothing I've seen. I mean, I guess there are people who are suited for politics and can go the distance, and you can see that energy and that focus and the sharpness. It does not wane. Like, I mean, I could envision her on the campaign trail from 6 a.m. until, you know, midnight, because she has that focus and sharpness and energy that is almost superhuman.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, Angela Davis in the most recent New York Times profile said Black women are going to change, that they have been the backbone of change in America, and that they're going to continue to be, and that's what gives us hope. And Stacey Abrams is very much fits inside that definition, which is really comes through in the movie. And it's so hopeful to see someone with that much energy and that much focus working on this incredible problem.
And hopeful. I mean, you know, that's the other thing, is like when we feel down in the dumps and, you know, like this is never gonna get fixed, and to think about her and her energy and her focus and her not conceding, but then forming fair fight, you know, just the energy and the drive for democracy is just, you know, it just makes you know that you can't give up.
Yeah, oftentimes when I'm speaking with the apathetic and the naysayers, I point them towards, her amazing third act, rising, from the ashes to create Fear Fight. And when we look at what is happening right now in Georgia and the change that's happening there of who's turning out and this transition from red to purple, maybe even blue, a lot of it is attributed to the mobilization that Fear Fight has done.
And knocking, and I think that's what was so beautiful and hopeful about her campaign, was knocking on the doors, not of the likely voter lists who are always getting knocked on, but folks who are poor, folks who are Black and brown, who are overlooked by the party. And and bringing all those new voters, 1.5 million new voters, into the conversation in Georgia. Incredible. That is incredible. Yeah.
It just makes me smile. I know that the outcome that time wasn't what perhaps the Georgia voters had hoped, or at least the newly franchised voters had shown up en masse to try to create. But I feel, it's so hopeful. And the fact that her third act is so profound, and is, I think, going to be, like I said, to quote Angela Davis, this is who is going to change this stodgy, old, racist norm that we have functioned under for, as you say, from the beginning of time in this country. So,
yes, well, Black women shouldn't have to do all the work on their own. That is,
I agree. I agree.
That's what I say all the time.
I know.
We recognize and celebrate the work, as always.
Right. That article is so amazing to me. That's why I'm quoting it, because I just loved, I loved what she said. And I agree, it isn't only Black women, but that was her her perspective. But it is
Black women are leading, and of course it's not only, but one has to give credit where it's due.
But I think in telling this political history, it is important that our story is centered around a Black woman from the South, born in poverty. What many people would think were strikes against her, or if anything, are a part of what is her strength and beauty, and has contributed to her being an incredible leader. I think in this time of wanting to see and learn about others, our film is able to present not only the exterior story, but also the interiority of this incredible woman and what it has taken to get her to this place, but her commitment to our country and the change that, she sees as possible. It definitely, fueled our tank on days that we were daunted and felt that we were hitting a wall. It's almost like, what would Stacy do? That certainly became a mantra.
That's fabulous. That truly makes me, this whole experience has made me smile terrifically. So, but that's very hopeful in times that sometimes feel really dark. And then one of the things that I was really impressed and intrigued by is the social impact campaign and website that you guys set up. I would love for you to elaborate on that and maybe even give us the URL so that the audience, if they'd like, can check it out, because it's very unusual to have those things go hand in hand with the release of a documentary.
I think that's when the director producer hat comes on for Liz and I, whenever, I've started projects, I always think about who is the audience, how are we going to get to them? And particularly in all the conversations that Liz and I had with Stacy, we talked about this concept of we wanted to meet all of the potential constituents where they are. And so we started early on, working with the team at the Raven Group and the incredible Ben O'Keefe, our social impact manager, to create this website and campaign. And we also worked with Amazon Studios, who's a great supporter. So it's called allinforvoting.com. There is a broad range of resources with information on the film, information on the voting process, demystifying to help you figure out who's on the ballot, where can you go vote, and then how you can become further engaged as a poll worker, poll monitor. We've also incorporated an educational silo with a Grow a Voter curriculum for high school and college students, and a discussion guide if you want to have a watch party. But then working with Amazon, we took it a step further. There was a multi-state bus tour where pop-up screenings were hosted, but also registration. We have done micro grants to visual artists, and also grants to a lot of nonpartisan groups who have boots on the ground, who are working actively to make certain the franchise is available to everyone. And it's not directly a part of the social impact campaign, but we're really excited that, you know, starting on the 29th of this month through November 1st, the film will be available for free on Amazon Prime's YouTube channel globally. So you don't have to be a member. You can go to the YouTube channel and see this film, and as Liz says, you know, do a watch party and then tell people to share it with 5 more people.
That's brilliant. Liz, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, you know, Lisa has said it, and she's been an amazing force behind this outreach campaign. And, you know, it's just been wonderful to make a film, and then you're like, okay, how now can I do the outreach campaign? And it's, you know, just to have everything happening. Of course, there was no time to wait, but I'm really proud of the team that produced all of that material, and that it's out at the same time that the film is out.
That's spectacular. It's again, it goes to, I think, the thoroughness and completeness of vision that you and Lisa and Stacey Abrams had as a team in terms of making this story clearly laid out, having Stacey's amazing story, life story as part of this. And but yet there's an active component to it. Like you're watching,
yes,
but now you can actually, here is a way.
What do you do? Yeah, exactly. And we should also say that Dan Kogan, working with Lisa, you know, also they, you know, raised the money for this, and you know, it was a really big effort, and we're so pleased with how it's turned out and how many people are interacting with the site and finding their polling location or checking their voter registration. It's really amazing to see the film translate into that kind of action.
That's extraordinary. That's such a great achievement for all of you. That's great. And then I just wanted to ask a quick question, because in talking, you know, I always pre-interview people for anybody who in the PGA membership. And you had mentioned that this is an evergreen story, Lisa. And I'm curious if you would elaborate on that a bit.
Well, you know, at one point it became a little challenging because it seemed like every day there was a new story that was happening about voter suppression. I think we pushed as far as we could in terms of making our delivery date to be as current as possible. And we were able to include, you know, mention of the primaries in Wisconsin and Georgia. And then, you know, it's like, okay, we're locked, we're delivering, color correction, mix, etc. Oh, wow, the US Postal Service how can we get that in? And you know, there would be calls every day that from our team, like, well, no, there's this story. Well, there's always, unfortunately, at this juncture, going to be another story. The history itself is well documented. That is a big part of what we lean into, and that is not going to change. That is the evergreen part of this. Hopefully there will come a time when the amount of limitations that people run into and restrictions when they go to vote will change, but the currency is not fluctuated when it comes to this story.
That's thank you. That's a great, very beautiful explanation of what you meant by that. And then just lastly, is there anything that I perhaps haven't asked, or things that both of you, either of you, want to say about either the movie or the experience or any of it for this great PGA audience?
Vote. No, I think that was great, and think of anything that's outstanding, but just appreciate the opportunity to reach this, to engage in this conversation at this time. It's been it's felt like a necessary reference point to understand where we are in this with this country right now.
Well, as James Brown said, get into it, get involved. We're voting the election season. We're midstream, but it's not just this election. We still have issues with climate change, education, healthcare, the police reform. The list goes on, and the only way that change is going to happen that is really going to have an impact on our communities is for us to show up. I have a feeling that a lot of people in our producer community have already voted early. And so I would say, reach out to your community and see who you can help to get them in to vote, and excited about the possibility for change that is on the horizon and within reach.
That's great. Yes.
And I thought of one more thing I wanted to add, which is just that, it doesn't if this election turns out to, be some landslide for Joe Biden, it doesn't mean everything's okay, right? Like, we're still, you shouldn't have to win by millions and millions and millions of votes to have the will of this country, reflected in our government. So, there's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which has been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk for hundreds of days. We need to agitate for, voting rights reform, like we did everyone else did in the civil rights movement. It's that time again, because otherwise we will be back in a situation where we have minority rule, meaning a party which does not represent this country in its fullness. And so there's still a lot of work to do.
Yes, the Electoral College.
Well, that's another one too.
Yeah, I always think about that. And I've been doing a lot of phone banking, and I really recommend to people, if you can't be a poll worker or there are other issues, you can do it safely from your home. And, you're just encouraging people to vote. So along with watching All In: The Fight for Democracy, which the website gives you lots of ways to participate, that I really strongly recommend that too. But thank you guys so much. This movie is so great, and I think it has such a gut punch impact, and your timing, I'm so glad you got it done in time to kind of help people hopefully motivate people to get involved politically and get active and to vote, as you said, Liz. Thank you, guys. Is there if there's nothing else, I think we might be done.
Thank you, Shelby.
Great. Thank you so much, Shelby, for giving your time to this film and discussion.
Who could say no to the two of you and this movie? Nobody. I challenge someone.
When we heard the extraordinaire Shelby Stone was involved, we were like, sign us up. Love fest.
It is, but thank you again. And I urge everyone to take a look at this movie. It's really amazing. The best 2 hours you may spend of your life. So cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Shelby.
Welcome.